Hello and welcome to Shrimp Disease Prevention and Management webinar. My name is Lucia Barreiro and I am the editor of Hatchery Feed Management. This is the first webinar in the series Trends in Aquaculture Hatcheries that we will hold in the coming months. The series will focus on different topics of importance for hatcheries, such as diseases, breeding and genetics, and feeds. Aligned with our goal to support the industry and thanks to the support of our sponsors, all these webinars are open and free. Today, in this first webinar, we have a great panel that will focus on some strategies for managing diseases in shrimp hatcheries. The increase in shrimp production in recent years has resulted from the intensification of production, which is directly related to the higher incidence of diseases. For the success and sustainability of the shrimp industry, hatcheries need to produce healthy and quality seeds and implement biosecurity measures to prevent the entry of diseases. Our experts today will talk about how to ensure hatchery success. The webinar will run for an hour and a half. Each speaker will give a 15-minute presentation, and then we will get to a final panel session to answer questions from the audience. To submit a question, please type it in the Q&A box, and we will send a link to the recorded webinar in the coming days. All our webinars will be available on our website and YouTube. I want to especially thank our assistant editor and webinar manager, Marisa Yanaga, who is making sure all our webinars work. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you our moderator for this webinar, Jim Wyban. Jim is a leader in shrimp technology development. He developed the world's first SPF shrimp breeding company, High Health Aquaculture. Over 18 years, his company exported more than 350,000 SPF broodstock to 26 countries and pioneered breeding shrimp for virus resistance and fast growth. In 2012, Jim sold his company to an Asian multinational and now provides consulting services in shrimp breeding and technology. Jim, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Let me get started right away. Aloha to everyone from Hawaii. And first speaker in the session is Robin Pearl. He's the chief shrimper for American Penaeid. Robin operates a fully vertically integrated shrimp farm company in Florida. The company employs over 100 employees who work in genetics, hatchery, production, processing, and marketing departments. The company's brand name for food shrimp is Sun Shrimp, and its brand name for genetics is API High Vigor. The title of Robin's talk today is Biosecurity Only Works When You Practice What You Preach. Robin, take it away.
Mute. All right. Hello, everybody. One second. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, and good evening, and good afternoon, and good night to everybody around the world. My name is Robin Pearl. And I want to really thank Lucia for organizing this and inviting me to speak on this very important topic. I also want to say hello to my fellow presenters who have some very valuable advice for when it comes to feeds and broodstock and disease management. I also want to share my excitement to be working with Dr. Wyban, who's chairing the session, because he is really one of the most experienced shrimp professionals in the world and knows everything about SPF. And we're just lucky to have someone like Dr. Wyban. Even though he's retired, he's just still very much active, and that he's willing to share his experience and wisdom. And you know, before this meeting, we're commenting about the fact that my last presentation, I was actually Dr. Wyban was chairing that at the WAS in Hawaii, and that was a little bit over a year ago. And you know, it's amazing how much the world has changed in the past year. And you know, sitting there in Hawaii, we could have never imagined that it would have changed like this. So, did my slide advance? Because I can't see on here for some reason. But did it advance? My slide? Yes. Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
So anyway, I cannot think of a better example than the need for biosecurity than the current COVID pandemic, which has affected all of us. And whether it's COVID, which affects humans, or white spot, which is one of the many diseases that affect shrimp, we all have learned the importance of biosecurity over the past year. And you know, for us humans, we have to wear a mask, we have to socially distance ourselves, we have to wash our hands. If we're sick, we must isolate or quarantine ourselves. And many of these same lessons that we've learned now as part of, you know, being humans affected by disease and being affected by a disease that's transmittable, that's the same thing, the same rules apply to aquaculture. And, you know, we've been talking about biosecurity for many years, and it's something that a lot of people are concerned with, and a lot of people have implemented, and a lot of people are, you know, trying to do. But, you know, there's really no better time than now to be able to say, look, we need to take biosecurity seriously. We need to make this a priority for a company. And, you know, one of the biggest issues that I see out there is that there's not really a buy-in from all the way from the top of the organization to the bottom. And there's no excuse anymore, because now they have real live examples on what it is with COVID, which has affected every single one of us. So, you know, when we talk about biosecurity, there's many different forms that it takes. And there's, you know, the main focus of biosecurity is that you have to look at all the vectors of how can disease get into your facility. And so you know, you have feed, and you have animals, and you have environment, and you have water, and there's a lot of different things that come affected. And because there's other speakers on the topics of feed and disease and broodstock, I would like to concentrate a little bit more about operations tonight. And, you know, my title may be a little bit, you know, tongue-in-cheek, whereas, you know, you have to practice what you preach. But I find that so many times that, you know, people talk a whole bunch about a whole bunch of things, but then when you ask them the basic or simple thing, is are you doing this or this or this? And they don't have a good answer for it. And so, you know, it frankly is kind of frustrating out there, because you see people take some of the appropriate measures or implement the right infrastructure, but then they just don't follow up with it. So there's really no, you know, it needs something that is so important for your organization and so important for your success. Shrimp farming is hard, and, you know, if you are able to maintain good biosecurity, it will make your job easier. Yes, biosecurity is difficult, but it makes your job easier because shrimp farming is just really, really tough. So biosecurity comes in many forms, and people will be, other people on this talk will be addressing that. So what I like to do is I like to talk a little bit more about the holistic approach. And you know, it doesn't do anybody any good to come in here with a big manual and to have this beautiful big report that says this is how we're going to do biosecurity, and nobody practices it. You know, you need to have something that's actually obtainable. And sometimes it's better to do something on a lower level, but something that everybody buys into and actually enforces and applies, than to have something that is basically the holy grail. And so there's a lot of little things you can do. And again, if you do everything right and just skip something that's basic, you know, your biosecurity is only as strong as your weakest link. So hold on, next slide. So as you know, prior to the COVID pandemic, I got the chance to really travel a lot, and as some of my fellow panelists, we've been to many hatcheries all around the world. And you know, whenever we visit the hatchery, you know, we always get a nice reception, and they're always, you know, proud to show us their facility. And some places are really beautiful, some places not so. But you know, there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure out, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. And it's been kind of amazing to me, because I would go and visit a beautiful hatchery, and you know, they say, okay, you got to change your shoes, and you got to wash your hands, and sometimes have to put on a hazmat suit. And we walk through the disinfectant baths, and we go and visit the maturation, and then, oh, by the way, I want to show you our well point. We want to see where the water comes in, and we walk out there onto the beach. And when you walk onto the beach, you see, you know, a bunch of fishermen, and you see a bunch of other stuff, and you know, you're walking around. There's crabs, there's birds, and then after that, we walk right straight into the hatchery without doing anything else. No more foot baths, no more hand washing, no more anything. So the front looked really nice, and it was really impressive. And it's like, wow, these people are taking this very seriously. But then when it came to actually thinking, okay, wait a second, what about all these vectors? What about making sure you're keeping any possible disease vector out? they're missing the point. And so, you know, it was more maybe to impress me or anything else. I went to I will not say the country, but it was a very large hatchery company, and they owned like 4 or 5 hatcheries. And we went from hatchery to hatchery, and you know, we had the owner, we had a couple of the managers, the larviculture, everybody came with us, and it was a fantastic tour. We stopped for lunch and we visited a bunch of hatcheries. Well, every hatchery we went to, we had to go change all our outfits and everything else, but the owner didn't, and the managers didn't. And so I'm pretty sure that when we had that lunch, and it was delicious seafood lunch, that's generally what we get. And I'm pretty sure that we did not spread any disease into any of these hatcheries, but I'm not so sure about the owner and the managers. And it just doesn't make sense to me. So on the other hand, I would like to point out that I've been to, you know, shrimp farms and other places where, okay, they don't have a lot of biosecurity. But I was super impressed because the guy says, look, you know, you've been to visiting other places. I would prefer that you stand outside. And it wasn't that he was scared to show me his farm. He was just generally concerned about biosecurity. And so he actually had a more effective, even though he didn't have all the infrastructure in place yet, he actually had a more effective plan on keeping people out than all the other stuff that was done there. So again, one of the, you know, the themes of my talk is do something that makes common sense. And the point is that biosecurity will only work if it's implemented and that you get buy-in from the top down. Many times you see the boss and he parks in a separate car and he doesn't have to do what the other people do, and it just makes no sense. It needs to be from the top down and the bottom up, and it needs to be explained. So so that's kind of my talk about what I've seen out there. I want to give some examples of what we've done and what I believe is common sense, because you know, you can go into a lot of different details, but I want to just give a couple of basic common sense things that that we have implemented at our farm. And again, one of the things that I want to assure or impress upon you, that there's no one size fits all. There's different things for different people. And for me to sit here, you must do this, no, it may not apply to you. So it's better that you get your team at your hatchery in the meeting room and say, okay, what do we need to do to make sure we keep these diseases out, and then get buy-in from everybody all the way from top down. So as Jim said, we operate a large shrimp farming company, and we use we use SPF feeds, and we have all kinds of systems in place to manage disease vectors from coming into the farm. We have a closed facility. One of our biggest issues, or one of our biggest challenges, is employees, because we have a lot of people come to our farm, and there's a lot of deliveries being made, and there's a lot of shrimp leaving, and to make sure that all stays clean. And we supply a lot of broodstock around the world. We supply a lot of PLs around the world, and disease would be devastating not only for us but for all our customers, because they rely on our stocks to stock their farms, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And the other thing is, the employees will lose their job, we'll lose our money, we'll lose the company, everything else if we get a disease. So nobody has any benefit by us having disease. So we're trying to take this as serious as possible. And we have, there's a lot of signs everywhere when you get to our facility that kind of impart that, said, look, this is biosecure. There's no reason for you to enter. There's no need for you here. Make sure you abide by this. And we take it very seriously. And we've fired people if they break the rules. And we've been very strict. And so far, we've been in business 8 years, and we've always been disease free. And knock on wood, hopefully we can keep that way. So, but it's not without effort, and that's some of the stuff I want to go into. I don't know how am I doing on time. Do I have about 5 minutes left? Okay, all right. So we have 100 people, and one of the things we do is we train everybody when they start, and we try to emphasize them what's the most important part. Why is this even needed? And my favorite slide is this Santoy picture. What does this have to do with biosecurity? And one of the most difficult parts is to get people to understand why this is so critical, why this is so important. So we have actually told our people, says, look, if you go with your family to the beach this weekend and you go make sandcastles on the beach, do not come with the sandcastle or the buckets and everything else in the back of your car. Do not come back to the farm with that stuff in there. We do not allow any seafood. We do not allow anything marine-based. We do not allow any fishing with no nets, no shoes, no boots, nothing that comes from that could have possibly been contaminated. And when people get this, they understand everything else, and it starts to make sense. One of my biggest things that I've learned, and again, we have a very much a vested interest to make sure that we never get disease onto the farm. So I've traveled around and I've seen many people with the truck wash baths, and you know they're great, but they're only good if they're really maintained. Are people putting in the right amount of sterilizer or chemical to make sure that it's killing everything? Because if you don't, then actually you're probably spreading the disease around, or potentially it may be a vector for disease. So we actually came up with this this new system, and pretty nice. So every truck that comes onto the farm, it actually goes through a truck wash that completely washes it. Now this is highly chlorinated water, and after this first step, it goes through a similar spray with Virkon. So we know that every single truck that enters, whether it's a truck or car that enters our actual farm, gets fully sprayed. So this costs us, we've calculated, it costs us about $5 for every single truck that enters the farm. Sorry, how do I get to the next slide? For every vehicle that enters the farm. So it's very expensive, but again, it's one of those things that we have to do to make sure. And we wanted to make sure that we set the right example and set the right standard. The other thing, okay, this video is not stopping. How do I go next one? Oops, sorry about this. Okay, I think I got it. All right, so we have badges for every employee, and everybody is color coded. They're all wearing the shirts for the different departments. So somebody who works in algae does not get to enter larviculture. Somebody who works in larviculture doesn't get to enter maturation, and so forth. So all these areas are pretty much restricted, and if you don't have the badge to get in, you will not be able to get in there. So this is one of the ways that we're able to make sure that we keep biosecure. We do not spread things around the farm. One of the biggest things is always footwear, right? So we implemented a thing called the Danish footwear system, and basically this is a long hallway where when you walk into, on the left-hand side is the street side, and on the right side is the farm side. And when everybody walks in, they sit on the bench, they take off their shoes, and then they swing their feet across the bench, and on the other side is the farm shoes. And the farm shoes never ever leave the farm. They always stay on the farm. So we buy them for our employees, or they bring their own boots to the farm, but they never ever leave the farm. So it's one of the ways that we make sure that there's a clear demarcation between what's on the street and what's the farm. This is not expensive to implement, and this is very effective, especially I have a lot of people, because you want to make sure it all gets done, and this is done religiously, and everybody watches, because one of the things is when you have buy-in from your whole organization, it actually, everybody watches each other and makes sure that it all happens. One other thing that we've done, which has been it's been actually really successful, and one of the things is okay, there's no cell phones allowed, there's no food allowed on the farm, there's no drinks allowed on the farm. Everything is stored in these lockers, and this is where they have their breaks, this is where they lunch. So when you go out on the farm itself, you're there to work. You're not there to have fun with your friends. You're not there to go sit and have a sandwich in the middle of nowhere. So we keep everything on the farm. That way, nobody's walking with a little cooler or a little bag where you don't know what's in it. Everything stays in one location, and it's worked really well. And the thing about the cell phones, you say, well, why does he do that? It's all part of basically a discipline to say, look, you're here to work. This is a professional place. This is some place where you need to do it. And it's worked really, really well. And it may be shocking initially to implement some of these things, but for us, they had a really huge positive benefit. Obviously, you have your wash stations before you get on the farm, and everybody that goes on the farm, this is the first thing that they have. I know I'm running out of time. I'm coming, Jim. The last part is that everybody that enters the farm walks through this automatic foot wash, and this is when you go onto the farm or you come back. So every single time, these boots that are staying on the farm, they get washed at least twice a day, and they get disinfected to make sure that we do not bring anything to the farm. And these are simple things that we can do to make sure that we maintain a really, really good biosecure facility. And so this is how I kind of like to finish. I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to say, look, there's common sense things you can do. And, you know, there's a lot of consultants, a lot of experts, a lot of people saying you have to do this, this, this. Start with the basics. And it really is a common sense when you look at it. How do I keep disease off my farm? And yes, there's really special things you can do, but start with the basics and do those things really well, because you can buy our broodstock, or you can buy you know, Steve's broodstock from Hendrix, or from anybody else in the world. And these are SPF broodstock. Don't give him feed that has disease in it. I mean, it makes no sense. And so my point is, there's basic things you can do that are going to make a huge difference on not only your hatchery, but also your farmers. And it's all about figuring out a way to make the farmer successful, because that's how we're all going to be successful. So that's, I think that's all I have. Oops, went too far. Anyway, that's all I have, and I want to thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Robin. That was an excellent speech. And I have some questions for you, but we're going to get to the questions after the 4 speeches are done. And I should say to the audience, if you have questions that you want to ask to any of our speakers, please log those into the Q&A session, which you can see down at the bottom of the screen. It's Q&A. You just type in what your question is, and I will ask that of the speakers when we get to the end. But for now, we want to just press on and keep going with the speeches. So our next speaker is Florian Renault. He's the co-founder of SPF Shrimp Feeds. Florian has been working in the aquaculture industry for more than 10 years. He was the development manager of aquaculture feeds for ADM in Indonesia, the Philippines, India, and Vietnam for 7 years. He has later been in charge of the Artemia and Nauplii Center called Aqua West in Vietnam, which is now opening a second center in India in April 2021. The knowledge coupled with his extensive experience has led him and Stephen Christensen to launch the company SPF Shrimp Feeds in January 2020. Florian's talk today will be live SPF polychaetes, biosecurity and performance. Florian, take it away.
Yes, thanks, Jim. So yeah, today I'm broadcasting from Vietnam. So just let me pull out my presentation. All right, is it on? I guess. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, today I'm broadcasting from Vietnam, where I live, and we're gonna talk about SPF feeds, and more specifically about SPF polychaetes. I believe that SPF feed is the most important aspect in your hatchery, and we don't talk often about SPF feeds because now we are just using normal feeds. And like we all know that polychaetes is really the most important live and fresh feeds for your broodstock. But like now, your only option is to buy local polychaetes that are often illegally harvested and with absolutely no traceability and biosecurity. So this is what we're gonna talk today. I would like to start with that first slide for all of us to be on the same line about SPF statues. I took that quote from the Fishery magazine Reviews in Aquaculture, where they explain the meaning of SPF shrimp broodstock. And I was attending last Friday your presentation, Jim, for Mozuram University. And you were highlighting that most of broodstock companies are located in the US and also in Hawaii and Florida. And there is one reason for that, biosecurity. How can you biosecure, like hectares of ponds or hectares of like a big facility in, for example, in Asia or in Vietnam? This is really difficult. So I believe that farming polychaetes should follow that model. you can't biosecure hectares of farm in Asia. So I would advise hatcheries to use SPF polychaetes that are farmed so in Europe or in the US. I will not go into details about the disease EHP, like I'm sure that we all know that. What I want to highlight here is that the polychaete is a vector of EHP, and every day the hatcheries that are buying the local polychaetes, they take a risk every day. You only need one time, and then you're gonna jeopardize your full cycle of production. So EHP is very common in polychaetes. EHPND, the polychaetes is also a vector for EHPND. So and we can easily have the answer when we ask different labs. And I remember talking with Dr. Loc about that that problem in Vietnam, you know, about EHPND and EHP coming from the local polychaetes. Same thing about white spot syndrome. That virus may come from the polychaetes. And you all heard about DIV1, which is like so a new disease. We don't know much yet about that problem, but what we know for sure is that we found DIV1 into live polychaetes in China. So what I mean here is that the 4 main diseases that impact the shrimp industry, the 4 diseases, we found them in polychaetes, in local polychaetes. And as we know that all hatcheries are using live polychaetes, so they are taking a risk every day. Here are some recommendations from OIE about how to eliminate the disease. Because yes, you can, if you use the local polychaetes, so you can freeze them or boil them. Few hatcheries here are doing it. And we know that when you freeze the polychaetes for 24 hours at minus 20 degrees, EHP, the spores, right, will be destroyed. Same thing for EHPND. We know that the strains of Vibrio paramolyticus are known to be sensitive to freezing. And white spot syndrome, same thing, you can boil your polychaetes. The only problem with that is that once you will use your frozen polychaetes or boiled polychaetes and feed your broodstock, like you won't get the best performance. You won't get the same performance as live polychaetes. And I'm sure that everybody knows that already. So yes, this is safe, but that is a problem because when the hatchery imports the broodstock, they want to get the best from them. And so getting only 40 to 50% of what they can give is always is a problem for the hatchery. For 30 years now, I mean, we are using local polychaetes, live polychaetes all around the world. And in South America, they will be using more like a frozen polychaetes, but in Asia, it's only live polychaetes. And few big companies are boiling the polychaetes and freeze the polychaetes, but globally, they are using live polychaetes every day. And few research have been done to understand why the live polychaetes perform better than the frozen polychaetes. And so there is different opinions for, like, many people has a different opinion. My guess would be that once you freeze the polychaetes, something is happening with the reproductive hormone. And so is it disappearing once you freeze it? I would say that that would be my guess. So here are a few pictures that from Vietnam and India. So you can see that you can see that the biosecurity is totally absent here. So this is a risk that you are taking every day in your hatchery. And in Vietnam, so the local population will go every day on the beach to get the polychaetes. And so, of course, you have like no traceability, no biosecurity, no stable supply. For example, during the rainy season, it is very difficult to find local polychaetes. So you have like so many challenges when you buy local polychaetes. And for 2 years now in Vietnam, we can see some illegal imports of polychaetes from China. So I'm not saying that the Chinese polychaetes are bad. I'm just saying that we have absolutely no traceability. We don't know where those polychaetes are coming from. And the last thing is that something I find quite interesting is when you buy the local polychaetes, the polychaetes will be mixed with fresh water to increase the weight of the polychaetes. It means that when you buy 1 kilo of polychaetes, you in fact get only 600 to 700 grams. So that's just a way to to get like, more profits. But at the end, this is your hatchery that are buying 600 grams of polychaetes only. And I'm always surprised to see that hatcheries are importing what we can consider expensive broodstock and safe broodstock, SPF broodstock to their hatchery. But then once it's reached the hatchery, they will use some like local polychaetes or local feeds, unsafe feeds. So that's always a surprise because the broodstock company are carefully taking care of the broodstock. But then once it's reached the other countries, like everything's gone. And as I said, you only need one polychaete that will be infected. And often, so hatcheries ask me, okay, how do I avoid infections for my broodstock? Because I need to give them fresh and live feeds. Like there is no other feeds. So for me, what's the most important is the origin of the feeds. And so I would simply advise them to use frozen squid from the US or frozen Artemia biomass from Russia, from the US. And of course, like safe polychaetes. And this is of course the most important, but safe polychaetes is so important. And now we can find on the market some very good pelleted feeds. So I will always advise them to, use only SPF feeds where they know the origin of the product. So this is the only commercial farm of polychaetes. So they are located in the Netherlands, and they are farming polychaetes for more than 30 years. And when we look at the pictures, we can see a very clean and clear biosecure area. Like, do you imagine to have this kind of farm, for example, in Vietnam or in India? It will cost you millions in biosecurity. So that's what I said for my first slides. The SPF status, is really based on where is the farm, where is the broodstock center, where is the polychaete farms, and something that we will see after in my next slides. But what's really important here is that the Netherlands, all along the year, the water is cold. So we can consider it as cold water polychaetes. And you will see that in terms of nutritional value, this is really important. So we took the polychaetes from Topsy and we sent them to the lab. And we wanted to check what's the nutritional value from the cold water polychaete versus Vietnamese polychaete that we can consider warm water polychaete. And the protein is slightly higher for the cold water polychaetes compared to the Vietnamese polychaetes, but that's not really important because that's not what we are looking for your broodstock. So when we look at the hydrolyzed fats, the SPF polychaete shows a value of 2.17, and the Vietnamese polychaete shows 0.79. So that's really important. And we're gonna go deeper on that nutritional value and look for the fatty acids profile, because that's what's really interesting here. When we look at the SPF polychaetes, they have a total fatty acids of 2,400 milligrams per 100 gram. And when we look at the Vietnamese polychaetes, they only reach like around 400 milligrams per 100 gram. So there is a huge difference. So you can imagine that when you use some cold water polychaetes for your broodstock, you can realize all the outcomes that you get from cold water polychaetes. And then our next idea was to check the nutritional value of the shrimp eggs. So from one batch of broodstock fed by SPF polychaetes and one batch of broodstock fed by Vietnamese polychaetes. And here again, you know, it's not really a surprise, but here again, the difference is huge. So when we look at the total fatty acid, there is nearly 1,000 milligrams per 100 gram of difference. This is 25% difference. So do you imagine like the quality of your eggs using some cold water polychaetes? We also did some trial last year at Dr. Loc's hatchery, and we wanted to see if the European polychaetes were performing as the local polychaetes. And when we looked at maturation rates and mating rates, so the cold water polychaetes gave a better maturation and mating rates. And when we look at the average eggs at one spawning and hatching rates, the Vietnamese polychaetes perform a little bit better. So we know that using the European polychaetes, we know that we at least get the same quantity of eggs and the same quantity of Nauplii. Here is the next slide where, so this is the same trial where we had 37 pairs of broodstock. What's interesting to see here is that we got the SPF polychaetes fed to the broodstock spawn like a week earlier than the local polychaetes. And the total spawn on that trial were 81 from the cold water polychaete and 44 from the Vietnamese polychaetes. And the last number, the last figure, is the number of females with at least 2 spawns. And we got 23 from the SPF polychaetes and 10 only from the Vietnamese polychaetes. And at the end of the trial, so from 37 pairs of broodstock, we checked the quantity of Nauplii that we collected, that we selected actually. So because of the broodstock that were fed SPF polychaetes were spawning more often, so we got a higher number of Nauplii selected. So this is a big increase, like 68% from the same batch of broodstock and for the same period of time. So this is like significantly a big success. And finally, here is my last slide. This is the also some interesting data because when we use the cold water polychaetes, as I explained, they have more fatty acid, they have more fat. So the consumption on the broodstock were lower on cold water polychaetes than warm water polychaetes. So this is, I think, some good information for hatcheries that now have an option of using SPF polychaetes instead of local polychaetes. Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, I will answer your question at the end of the 2 other speakers.
Great. Thank you, Florian. That was excellent. I have a number of questions I want to ask you, but later. Sure. To the audience, anyone that has questions for Florian or for Robin or any of the other speakers, please type them into the Q&A, which you can find on the lower right side of the screen. And we'll get to those questions after our 4 speakers finish their presentations. Okay, so the next talk is Steve Arce, and Steve is the technical manager for Asia Shrimp Hendrix Genetics. Steve has 20 years of shrimp technical and management experience, including research and development of SPF Vannamei shrimp stocks from the Oceanic Institute in Hawaii. He's also provided shrimp breeding and biosecurity consulting services in Latin America and Asia for both government institutions and private commercial companies. He joined Hendrix Genetics, Kona Bay in 2016 and has been the technical manager for the Asia shrimp unit for the past 5 years. Today, Steve will speak to us on hatchery management, pathogen control for SPF Vanameae. Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, I'd like to thank Lucia and Aquatic Feeds for the opportunity to present on behalf of Hendrix Genetics and Kona Bay. As Jim said, the title of my presentation is Hatchery Management and Pathogen Control for SPF Vanameae. So let me start here. So I'd first like to start off with talking about stock control and the benefits of SPF stocks. Stock control is a critical component of biosecurity. It requires routine monitoring, pathogen surveillance, and the benefits are that it maximizes the genetic potential of commercially available stocks. Also, it's been known that healthy PLs offer improved performance and increased production on the farm. So with that, I'll move into the technical portion. So hatchery management is comprised basically of two different divisions, maturation and larviculture. And shrimp performance is based on three factors, namely genetics, management, and environment. In terms of the maturation management, that's comprised of the broodstock, the facility, water quality and its parameters, feeding and health and biosecurity. I'd like to mention some of the critical control points, which include the facility entrance, as Robin showed, with the trucks entering and personnel, water treatment, the quarantining of incoming broodstock or certification that they are SPF, regular dryouts of your hatcheries, and dedicated staff and equipment, which leads to tighter biosecurity and mitigation of any transfer of potential pathogens which can cause disease. This slide just shows the basic maturation parameters for broodstock. I don't want to confuse anyone with the sex ratio there. This is based on the Asian model of separating males and females in separate maturation units. It's a 3-to-1 ratio because once you choose a gravid female of stage 4, you put her into the male tank, it ends up being about a 3-to-1 ratio. In a good system, you could have up anywhere from 15 to 20% of females coming up gravid every night. When you stick them in the male tank, you should achieve 80, 90% mating frequency per night. In terms of eye stalk ablation, hot forceps have been traditionally used. Hendrix is now promoting non-ablation. We have information from our clients that there is no compromise with reproductive output. And in fact, recent research has shown that non-ablated stocks coming from non-ablated animals actually have a higher immune response and may be more pathogen tolerant. So that's another benefit of that. And each female can produce 6 to 8 million NOPs over a 4-month lifetime. So the broodstock being used are both SPF and SPT. I'd like to point out that SPF is strictly a health status, specific pathogen-free for those diseases being screened for by the company selling those animals. So some companies' SPF list may be 13 to 15, some maybe 2 to 3. So it's very important to understand what these terms mean. SPT is a genetic classification for specific pathogen tolerance. I think tolerance is more appropriate than resistance, given recent research. And our stocks basically they're all SPF, and they have varying levels of SPT determined on the line. Age is also a very important factor, as you'll see further in the talk. The lines that Hendrix and Kona Bay offers are our speed line, our balance line, and our strength line. I'm just quickly going to show this slide to show some of the performance characteristics of those lines. These are based from both our Kauai facility and from international client data. For the client data, we take the top 20% of our results. because that represents the clients who employ best management practices. And this highlights the genetic potential of stocks reared under proper management and conditions. So again, you're maximizing the potential of your investment for an expensive broodstock. As Florian said, it's always amazed me also how, as companies buy SPF stocks and turn around and feed them bloodworms or other feeds from the wild. It just didn't make any sense. But I think with more education and webinars like this, people can get educated and understand that it's a whole chain solution here that needs to be implemented by everybody involved in the industry. So here's some photos of some of the broodstock females. A stage 4 female is shown in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. The right shows a female thylacum. Vaname is an open thylacum species as opposed to monodon, who's closed thylacum. So there are different management strategies for that. I've learned over the years that selective breeding is basically changing the biology of the animal. Age and size considerations may change based on what line you provide. For instance, we have speed line animals now that can reach 40 grams in 4 months, and they're not quite physiologically mature. So at this point in time, some of our lines, the onset of maturation isn't until 50 grams. So those are components that companies as Hendrix and others I'm sure will do, will start educating their clients about how these different lines that are being developed need to be managed and maintained differently. For male broodstock, a photo here of full spermatophore. There should be a pure white color with clear differentiation when you look at it. Joined patasmas, clean body and gills, typically about 6 to 7 months of age, and between 35 to 40 grams of body weight, again, depending on the line. Some of the basic water quality parameters here, a very narrow temperature range of 27 to 28.5 degrees is required just to maintain a stable environment. Salinity ranges from 30 to 34. This is for the maturation and hatchery only. We know that in the farming environment, it can go down as low as 0 or very low brackish water. Water treatment is critical here, to use filtered and sterilized seawater, either by UZ, ozone, or chlorine. In areas where EHP is an issue, you may want to incorporate microfiltration and go down to less than 1 micron in order to filter out any EHP spores that may come in from your water source. Broodstock nutrition, obviously nutrition is a major factor on spawn quality and performance. It's essential to produce high quality larvae, especially with the improved genetics of commercially available breeders from many companies now. Importantly, current broodstock nutrition practices also pose a threat to pathogen infection, as in live polychaetes and other wet feeds that are coming in from the wild, like clams and mussels, that can be vectors. And we see this repeating itself over and over again in Asia, Latin America as well. So it's very important to realize that you have to have not only stock control, but feed control of high quality feeds that you're feeding to your SPF broodstock. This slide represents a typical maturation feeding program. The main food for broodstock is polychaetes. You should incorporate similar feeding regimes for both males and females to ensure quality nauplii. And importantly, all wet feeds should undergo some type of disinfection or be supplied from a reliable SPF source. Live polychaetes are risky, but if they're SPF, they're lower in vibrios. It's easier to maintain good water conditions. Despite years and years of research, polychaetes still have not been able to be replaced 100%. So including SPF polychaetes in your diet at high rates, typically close to 30% of total biomass per day is required. It may differ site specifically or in your region, but that's generally, and that has increased over the years, again, due to the increased reproductive performance of shrimp broodstock that have been developed through genetic selection and breeding. I'd like to move now into maturation, disease and control. I won't get into the major diseases of concern. I'll just focus on the basic ones here as we have limited time. One of the major issues we see a lot are molting issues that are caused by Xanthanium and filamentous bacteria. Some of the easy solutions for that are to treat with a 50 ppm formalin solution for 1 hour, followed by 100% water exchange, and applying probiotics after the water exchange to improve the water quality and the condition of the animal. Another issue is necrosis. Again, this is caused in both maturation hatchery systems by bacteria and protozoa. It can lead to animal condition issues. It's critical to maintain a clean and healthy environment with proper water treatment. The solutions are basically the same here as maintaining the feed to satiation, not too much overfeeding, keeping high water exchange, applying probiotics, and replacing your broodstock every 3 to 4 months. For gill disease, the major culprits of gill disease are Vibrio, filamentous bacteria, Xanthanium, mostly caused from overfeeding or poor water quality, which is poor filtration or poor feed management. Again, the formalin solution, a light dose, and to monitor and maintain your feeding is the way to get around that issue. Nauplii Deformity is mostly a dietary issue, which can be solved with either dietary supplements and also keeping a track of the broodstock age. So critical feeding of polychaetes is important in this as well, as it's been shown that live polychaetes actually have shown to have a decrease in Nauplii deformity. I'm not sure what is causing that, but it's important to know that. We've been trying to sell clients on the idea of frozen polychaetes for many years, but we realized that live polychaetes are the way to go. So I'm very excited to see the research being done now to provide that product to our clients, because again, it supports the SPF broodstock industry. So some of the basic solutions in a maturation system are using controlled inputs of clean broodstock and high quality feeds are essential. The maturation phase contributes about 50% importance to produce strong and healthy PLs. Nauplii quality is a major factor for PL survival. And a common problem for Vaniculture is Awea syndrome, which again, it could be related to the polychaetes and female nutrition. So it all works together from the beginning if you want to make it to the end with a successful product. I'd like to transition now into larviculture management. So these are some of the basic larviculture management parameters. I won't go into any of these. These are pretty well known. Photo period, we're recommending natural photo period. There's some cost savings with that, and we find that it, it keeps the animals more in tune with the natural environment, including moon phases, which sometimes can affect molt cycles and other things like that. I'll move on now to larval rearing tanks. We think smaller hatcheries and smaller tanks in the 4 to 6 ton range are the most effective. You can stock 1 to 1.5 million Nauplii per tank. These are epoxy coated tanks. You can use black covers for the whole cycle or until PL for stability. They're generally flat bottomed and they're single phase. This offers more control and allows for more effective phased out, dry out of a facility. So we think it's a much more efficient modular way of maintaining cleanliness in your hatchery. Some of the important water quality parameters to keep track of in the water quality. It's really important to keep these parameters stable and very important to keep track of your monitoring equipment to make sure that it's properly calibrated so you can monitor on a regular basis and use that as a management tool to control the ammonia, nitrates, maintain your DOs above 5 milligrams per liter. These are all just common basic management strategies that the industry has been preaching for years, but still it's back to basics and a little bit of improvement to maintain and maximize the genetic gains in broodstock. Okay, just a quick photo of the different phases of Nauplii to post larvae. Typically, it takes 19 to 21 days to PL 10 to 12. The larvae at each phase should be evaluated under a microscope and graded to support management practices. Probably hard to read this larval reading protocol table, but the key points are frequency and quality of feeding. You'd like to feed the animals 6 to 8 times a day, provide live, high-quality algae for the early stages of zoea to mysis. Artemia can start in late zoea through early mysis, and to control consistent temperature to ensure proper staging of your animals. So feeding, live feeds create less water quality problems. It's important to feed to satiation and monitor any excess. Always check your algae quality. Disinfect and feed instar 1 Artemia, which are young Artemia, and I'll get to that in a second. Also, the use of high quality liquid or microencapsulated feeds or flake diets, and to monitor your larvae and the feed size to make sure that they can properly eat it. And siphoning of tanks to ensure and insurance of proper aeration. Now, live algae is a very important basic part of animal husbandry. I'd like to highlight the algal density required at about 80,000 to 130,000 cells per meter through zoea and mysis. The most common species used are Cattosaurus and Thalassosaria. Good water quality and proper lighting is critical for healthy algae cultures. It's a common Achilles heel in hatchery management to start with some poor algae, which compromises animal nutrition and health early on, and it leads to ongoing issues. So the bottom line here is you need a good start for a successful finish. Some of the keys for Artemia: you need to initiate Artemia feeding in the late zoea, early mysis. Artemia, young Artemia instar 1 must be killed first, because at that stage, the shrimp larvae are not able to chase and capture the feed. So it's best frozen in 24 hours, like little Artemia ice cubes or popsicles. You can also use CO2 or hot water to kill the Artemia and feed it in those early stages. You can start feeding live Artemia to PL at PL1 stage once they're able to swim and catch their prey. Artemia can also be a vector for pathogens and bacteria, so they must disinfect it. H2O2 or hydrogen peroxide is the best source of disinfectant for Artemia we found. It's very easy and simple to use and very effective. Again, monitoring, you need to check your water quality frequently. At the same time every day to make sure that you're getting consistent readings, especially temperature, salinity, pH, ammonia, and nitrites. Make records that you can consult and refer to if you have any issues. You can see if something is different or where something may have gone astray. Also, monitoring is important for feed rate, because the animal's appetite might change daily based on local environmental conditions, lower salinity, molting phases, things like that. So being in tune and at one with your hatchery is very important to ensure you know exactly what's going on in each tank. The last part of this presentation will focus on larviculture disease and control. So necrosis and fouling, actually caused by bacteria and protozoan infections due to poor water quality. Overfeeding can contribute to that, or unclean tanks. Some of the major solutions for that are just to maintain your feeding regime, checking, ensuring minimal residual feed, washing and scrubbing the tanks between cycles, exchanging the water, and applying probiotics. Now, Zoea 1 syndrome, in this case, it can be caused by bacterial as well, but in this case, this photo shows Langinium or fungal infection of infected Nauplii caused by poor water quality. Again, the solutions are to have filtered and sterilized seawater and disinfect your spawning tanks and facility and all equipment being used. There's a common theme here, as you can see, of just maintaining proper water quality, high quality feeds, and good management, again, to promote the benefits of the broodstock available to the industry now. So management really hasn't changed much. There are some new technologies coming online. I don't think they're fully vetted yet or shown to be completely reliable, especially for the majority of the shrimp farming community. But going back to basics and maintaining good, consistent water quality is key, including for Zoea true syndrome, which has been the bane of shrimp hatcheries for probably over 30 years. It causes empty gut in Z1 and mortality in Z2. The cause is an unknown bacteria, but it's probably Vibrio harvii. Origin from the Nauplii, could come from the feeds, the water, the pipes, live algae, or Artemia. You can also check for these symptoms and for green Vibrios on TCBS. All you can really do here is use prevention techniques. I won't go through all these techniques here, but basically an all-in and all-out strategy has been employed with increasing water temperatures after mysis to promote quicker staging. But again, the only way out of it is to continually to disinfect and wash your eggs and Nauplii and continue your cycles in the best management, with the best management practices possible. So the solutions basically for larviculture, Nauplii comprise of the other 50% of importance for quality PLs. And again, a quality PL will perform better on a farm environment. So everybody wins in that. The broodstock health must be free of diseases. I think the majority of the industry now is convinced that the use of SPF stocks is critical. Using live algae and live Artemia, and I should have added live SPF polychaetes, because that's also a critical component. And again, a common theme of good water quality is high quality feed, proper management, and that's always going to be the basis for successful shrimp larviculture. So in closing, I'd just like to note that with the improved genetics now available to the shrimp industry, it's crucial to provide proper health, nutrition, and management in order to truly benefit from the genetic potential of stocks being developed, not only by Hendrix Genetics, but by other breeding companies. The industry must adapt to the improved genetics with improved feeds and practices, and supported by proper management strategies to support the efforts of the breeding companies, so that we all benefit and the industry can flourish in the future. So thanks for your time and the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Great speech. And I agreed with your conclusion. And I have a few questions for you, but we'll get to that after the other speakers. So next up, we have Loc Tran from Vietnam is going to speak to us. And Loc Tran earned his PhD at the University of Arizona, working with Dr. Don Leitner and Dr. Kevin Fitzsimmons. And he worked on discovering the agent that caused EMS. Then he returned, after receiving his PhD, he returned to Vietnam and started his company, ShrimpVet Lab. The lab now has close to 100 technical personnel working on several aspects of the shrimp production value chain: diagnostics, product testing, R&D, innovations in seed production, nursery and farming, nutrition, and genetics. His lab has become a hub for technology development in Vietnam and applications in the region. Loc Tran will speak on disease prevention and health management strategies for shrimp post-larvae. Loc Tran.
Thank you, Jim. And can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so it's an honor for me to deliver my presentation today. And today I will cover a couple topics on disease management and shrimp health management. And you know, it's a privilege for me to manage a laboratory in Vietnam that also include diagnostic and seed production. So we're dealing with disease management in real life. So just to give you with a couple idea on how serious the disease is. So I want to share with you a couple photos. Over here, we have 5 shrimp representing for 4 different diseases and an SPF shrimp. Those 5 shrimp were originally from the same stock and they were subjected to different disease challenges. So from the far right, you see the SPF, and then moving towards the left, you see the EHP, infected animal. And this disease caused stunt growth, and it caused massive problem in Vietnam. And later on, I will share with you how high prevalent it is in the farming system. In the middle, the letter number C, showing the EMS, infected animal. And this disease happened in Vietnam since early 2010. Farmers seem to understand how to manage this, but the contamination in hatchery and shrimp farm is a huge problem at the moment. And moving to letter number B is white physis, infected animal. And our laboratory has been working on this for a couple of years, and we have a couple insights on this. And letter number A is showing a white spot infected animal. And we also have some emerging issue. For example, we have muscle necrosis caused by Vibrio harvii. And you know, this seems to be a hidden threat to the farming. And our laboratory has been able to isolate Vibrio harvii from infected animal, and it showed that in the challenge study, this bacterium can cause muscle necrosis, and it also caused some mortality in the pond as well. And over here with the microscope, we can see the bacteria analyzing the muscle fibers. We also understand where it comes from and how should we implement in order to prevent it from happening or to intervene once it happens. But so far, the bacteria can penetrate through the shrimp shell. It come across the defense barrier of the animal and infect the shrimp muscle. So for intervention, what we should do is to exchange water, applying disinfection like iodine 1 ppm, and apply some prophylaxis in feed. But the key point here is that I'm seeing that the shrimp now has less robustness. And that is why they seem to be more susceptible to this type of bacterial infection. So in this photo, we see the contrast of the EMS and versus the non-EMS animal. So EMS affect the shrimp hepatopancreas and midgut and causing the destruction of the hepatopancreas. And we all know that the disease coming from a toxin produced from the toxin gene, PRAB. And also very interesting that the laboratory could also isolate and demonstrate that white physis, which is a very common disease now in Southeast Asia. is due to a bacterium. So we could experimentally infect the animal with those bacteria, and the shrimp express exactly the same symptom. For Microsporidium, EHP, the laboratory could detect this agent in Vietnam since 2014. And now it become a pretty big issue. I think it's not only in Southeast Asia, but it could spread to other region as well, especially like in India. And in the laboratory, we could also demonstrate the route of infection via fecal-oral route, and the infected animal express reduced feeding and very slow growth, and also more susceptibility to other bacterial infection. And this leads to a very interesting phenomenon in the farm, that sometimes we find the co-infection of Vibrios and EHP. And probably if shrimp are pre-exposed to EHP, they express more susceptibility to bacteria, and that results in a permanent non-recoverable white physis. But also we see the white physis caused by the bacteria alone, and this usually happens due to mismanagement in the farm, for example, overfeeding. And if the white physis is caused only by Vibrio, we have a chance to rescue that pond by correct management. I want to share with you, I want to point out where we conduct this trial because it's quite sensitive. But the laboratory has been screening for thousands of samples from post-larvae to broodstock feed, including bloodworm, oyster, squid, and also broodstock fishes. And we also check for the grow-out shrimp from those animals, those post-larvae. And the interesting thing here is that look at the data of the post-larvae. You see from 2018, 2019, the prevalence of both EMS and EHP almost triple. So that means we have a growing issue. The bloodworm, oyster, and squid has some percentage of contamination. And because the contamination of the broodstock feed usually correlates with the farming activity in the region. So it's also happened seasonally. And very interestingly, that broodstock, after being kept in the maturation for a few months, they become contaminated. For example, EMS is very clear. And also that reflects in the farm with a growing percentage of farm with EMS and EHP. So if we check, randomly a shrimp pond in the region, we may find up to 60% of EHP contamination. And that may explain why the growth rate in the farm, or in some region seems to decline. And people may blame, due to the broodstock, etc. But, the farming region can be contaminated. And the route of the infection, is very clear here, that live feed, contaminated live feed, we transfer the pathogen to broodstock, and then to Nauplii, and then to post-larvae and grow-out shrimp. And yeah, over here, just a couple of photos demonstrating the shrimp love bloodworm and oyster, etc. But how to keep those feed clean is not easy. And not just EMS and EHP, we also have some emerging issue. For example, Vibrios can be detected in live feed. This is very obvious, and our laboratory already developed some PCR methods to detect for some new emerging pathogenic Vibrio. For example, Vibrio harveyi causing muscle necrosis, like I mentioned, and luminescent disease. And we don't know whether another pathogen to come, like DAV or some other thing else. And I think biosecurity, is a very broad term and should include sanitation practice, diagnosis, screening for own inputs, live feed, Artemia, etc. And Artemia is also interesting because it can be contaminated with bacteria and other things. And like Steve said that H2O2 could be a good way to disinfect. And we also find some other practices like mixing with monoglyceride is a prophylaxis, or with probiotic, etc. And also very importantly in the larviculture, better microbiota management is one of the crucial practice. For post-larvae health assessment, PCR for white spot, EHB, and EMS is mandatory. And in the laboratory, we have been checking for thousands of samples, and we never came across TSV, never came across IMNV, at least in Vietnam, and some other OAE listed viral disease. So that means it's very low in prevalence. So we should put our effort in some more relevant disease. Vibrio harveyi and DAV should also be considered. Some basic microbiology like luminous bacteria, green colony density, etc. should be checked. And something really obvious like formalin and salinity stress test can quickly give us some idea how robustness is the stock is. And size variation is also a strong indicator, because sometimes shrimp with bacterial infection or with EHB contamination may express some size variation. And we should also check for the HB lipid droplets density, because it also expresses how shrimp PL condition is. And what happens if we have a stock that contaminates with EMS? That if we stock with infected PL, it may express the mortality within 2 weeks of stocking very quickly. And during the grow out, some other source of contamination, pollution, algal crash, and unstable condition, and very obviously overfeeding will result in EMS. This could be a little bit irrelevant, but I want to tell you that now the genetic line seems to grow really fast. So the animal feeding like crazy, especially during day 20 to day 35. So that means they keep feeding, but the pond condition, temperature fluctuation, there's a lot of hidden stress, and the animal just don't know. And if we keep feeding to the animal just don't have the power, the strength, and the readiness to overcome the stress. And that may explain why the disease may happen very quickly. So understanding more about our animal and having a better feeding strategy, I think is also a crucial thing to keep the stock alive. I want to share with you what happened in the larviculture with regards to Vibrio. And usually we see Vibrio may surge very quickly during the zooyear stage due to the unstable microbiota in the tank. And this may explain why we have a lot of issues during the zooyear stage, zooyear 1, zooyear 2. And sometimes when we check for the esophagus of the zoea, we could see a lot of bacterial colonization. And during the mysis, it seems to calm down a little bit, but during the post-larvae, due to an increase of formulated diet, the Vibrio may try again. And this may explain why sometimes we have luminous bacteria, we have EMS in hatchery, and that also explains why there was a lot of mortality in many hatchery in Latin America in late 2018. And this is exactly what happened. We also developed some remedy, some protocol for probiotic activation applied in hatchery. And the idea is that we need to give a jump start for probiotic in order to maintain bacterial count Vibrio at a stable level. I don't want to go into detail, but we can share with you, or you can come back and check this protocol later. And if we can maintain a good probiotic population in the tank, like the orange curve, it always has to be like 10 to 100 times higher than the Vibrio density. And if we can manage this, the Vibrio seems to be very stable, around 10 to the power 3, and this is considered okay. And we can also add active probiotic directly into the shrimp gut. And our laboratory has developed this protocol, and it seems to work really well. That we can cook soybean meal and rice bran and ferment it with gut probiotics and feed as a supplemental diet for post-larvae and shrimp during the nursery and all the way to grower stage. And this helps prevent a lot of viruses affecting shrimp in the GI tract. And in the laboratory, we could demonstrate that fermented probiotics has advantage in suppressing Vibrio. Here's another photo demonstrating that fermented feed can arm the shrimp with a lot of good probiotic and change the gut color. And this set of photos shows something interesting. You see in the picture in the far left, showing some shrimp with some abnormal hepatopancreas, empty gut, and stomach, indicating that this stock were affected by EMS in the nursery. And then we applying our treatment by doing water exchange, feeding with fermented feed. And you see the shrimp start to recover from day 2. And on day 4, they become healthier again. But the thing is that once the stock are contaminated, we have to be very careful because the disease can come back at any time. There's a couple of procedures we have to bear in mind when we're dealing with EMS, and EHP, especially EHP, because the pond or the tank system can be contaminated with EHP, and it could be very difficult to get rid of. And there's a couple protocol using sodium hydroxide, calcium hydroxide, etc., could be very helpful in killing EHP. Yeah, here's a couple of photos showing how unstable pond microbiota can result in a lot of fluctuation in water quality and resulting in more stress and diseases. For EMS intervention procedure, we also developed that include reduced feeding, increasing water exchange siphoning, and also controlling algae. And then we can double the use of probiotic and immunostimulation and prophylaxis. For EHP prevention, I think this is quite interesting, that the checkpoint include broodstock feed, Nauplii, and post-larvae using PCR. For biosecurity, water disinfection and water treatment is super crucial. And using ultrafiltration, I think is needed to filter out the spores. Surface disinfection of our facility after each crop is super essential. And I think one of the most important thing here is make sure that we are not feeding wild caught fresh feed. We just freeze it. And in our laboratory, we demonstrate that we could never infect shrimp with EHP with frozen material. And that was my failure a couple of years back. And that was why we invented this protocol. So for squid and oyster, it's okay to do the freezing. But for polychaetes, like Steve and other presenter already said, it may compromise the spawning performance. So this is a huge issue for us to overcome. And for Nauplii, we can use a simple protocol of washing Nauplii with formalin at 200 ppm for 30 seconds. And this is proven to eradicate a lot of EHP. I don't want to go into detail on EHP prevention in the farm, but one of the most important things is be sure that you check the pond, be sure that the pond is clean, is thoroughly disinfected, and you check for the ADG. Because it's very clear that now with better genetics, shrimp can achieve ADG of 0.3 to 0.4 easily. So if the ADG fall below, let's say 0.15, you should put a question mark and you should check the pond. And if they are EHP positive and they're still small and they're not growing, you just consider doing the harvest. I want to share with you a couple data that we did in the laboratory with regards to prevention using yeast to improve the shrimp robustness, and they survive better in the EMS challenge. We also formulate new diets using single cell protein, and also that boosts the shrimp immunity. We can also use some essential oil as prophylaxis and other type of prophylaxis, as well as organic acid or monoglyceride. They were all proven to improve the shrimp survivability. And very clearly that something really interesting when we ferment the plant protein. And when we formulate the diet with appropriate inclusion rate of fermented plant protein, it really improved the shrimp robustness. There's a couple of current issues that I want to discuss. That for broodstock feed, contamination, screening for pathogen and freezing, that is what we have at the moment. It's not enough to control bacterial disease. Even though it's okay to prevent EHP and we may sacrifice some fecundity, but it's not enough for bacterial disease control. And not many options for broodstock feed decontamination. Freezing, soaking in boiling water. Yeah, I don't know whether it is effective. Or gamma irradiation, even though on paper it works, but in practice it's very difficult to apply. For SPF feed, I see there's a growing number of local companies starting their broodstock feed cultivation. However, I think they should also understand some basic of SPF program, because if they started a cultivation polychaete program without concerning the biosecurity and checking for EHP and EMS, they're just wasting their time and money. For SPF feed cultivation in isolated disease-free area, I think is a great concept, but we need to consider logistic and cost. Whether should we consider something brand new, like better method for broodstock feed formulation? I think a lot of attempt on doing this. But how about freshly frozen formulated diet? For example, we just make the freshly formulated diet and vacuum pack and freeze it, and we can transport it frozen. Because my gut feeling is that when we freeze the live polychaete and we thaw it, there's a lot of leakage of fluid inside this, the polychaete, and the polychaete just only has the shell left, but no fluid inside. So that is why it could be an issue. And how about selection for broodstock that adapt to formulated maturation feed? Because it seems that we, I'm not sure if people like Jim Wyban already started something like this, but this could be very interesting. So there's a couple of take-home messages from my presentation is that post-larvae quality is crucial. I would say this is vital for shrimp farming because I have my farm. I understand how crucial PL quality is. Stress and other microbiological upset in the system make the shrimp more susceptible to diseases, for sure. And I think we have to strengthen biosecurity, improving shrimp health, and reducing environmental and biological stress, a key step for disease control, not only trying to eradicating the pathogen, because in real life, the pathogen is very, how to say, we can find everywhere, even though we try our best. So holistic approach are viable for disease control. I think we have to approach this. Okay, with this, I would like to thank all the participant and the organizer. Thank you.
Thank you, Loc Tran. Very interesting presentation. I see in the Q&A session, we have quite a few questions distributed over each of our speakers. If I just go down the line, I'm going to be just exclusively with Steve, which isn't fair. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. But let's see, the first question we have is from Wilson Lum. He wants to know, how do you make sure your algae are SPF? Robin Pearl, do you want to comment on that? Are your algae SPF?
Very good question. And I was looking at it, and honestly, I don't know. I mean, we use pure algae cultures. We use clean water. And I guess that's how you maintain SPF. There may be somebody that's more, maybe Loc Tran can be a better one, but it's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. Loc Tran, you have a comment on that idea of the algae being SPF?
I don't think we have SPF algae, but we can start clean algae cultivation program with pure culture and with the stock culture in flask. Make sure that you have a quality control team checking for the cleanness of the algae, and be sure that you can keep the indoor culture as long as you can, because when you doing the outdoor culture, that is where the contamination start. Yeah, and we also check for a lot of sample from outdoor algae culture, and sometimes we see a very high density of bacterial density. And I see a couple company, at least here in Vietnam, starting their algae production and having the concentrated algae with all the quality control and deliverable to hatchery. I think that's also quite interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I wonder, Florian, do you have any interest in that side of the feed market? You have SPF feeds. Would you consider SPF algae as one of your products? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm aware about that company that Dr. Loc is mentioning. And yeah, that's a new product in Vietnam. And like yeah, really good products, and they have a very nice facility, and so they just grow algae and freeze it, and then deliver to hatcheries. But yeah, this is exactly something that we are thinking for our portfolio. And yes, definitely. For the last 2 years, we focused on like SPF polychaetes mostly, but clearly SPF algae is the next thing. You know, it's like this is really important for hatcheries.
Can I ask, how do they, in what form do they deliver the product? Is it paste, or is it, you know,
Yeah,
a billion cells per ml, or what's the form?
Yeah, they deliver like frozen microalgae in a bottle like 300 or 500 ml. And then you know your concentration before you use the product, and then you just added the quantity of cells that you want per ml. It's very easy to use. Like it's a good thing, like really good thing.
I will add that in my company, we, you know, once we got going with probiotics, it just started getting like more and more and more the stuff of Loc Tran pointing out that sterilized water is like the perfect environment for Vibrio to grow. So when we disinfected our water, wow, probiotic right away. No. Well, we got to the point where once the algae culture was going to the, you know, the large stage cylinder, we added probiotic into that, and we saw no negative effect to it, and had some sense that, well, maybe we were, you know, suppressing any kind of pathogenic bacteria from getting going in the algae. So it's a thought, at least.
Yeah.
And I don't work for any probiotic company, so I'm not selling that. That's just it. Okay, let's move on into questions. Mr. Steve, this question, they understand that you, I mean, Hendrix Genetics, is constructing a new facility in Banten, Indonesia. And will you make your strength line available to the Indonesian market?
The current plan is to only offer our balance line to the Indonesian market, but that may change in the future. But I will bring up the request to Hendrix Management. I know that many of our clients in other countries are interested in all the lines, but for the time being, due to infrastructure restrictions and different things like that, it's the balance line that will be distributed from our BMCs.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple more questions for Steve, but I'm going to jump to Loc Tran. This question is, the bacteria causing white feces disease is characterized. Is it a specific Vibrio?
Yeah, very good question. And at our laboratory, we have quite a few different isolate. And unfortunately, they're from different species. So we don't know whether it is species specific or it may govern by a toxin gene or something. That is something that we need to continue our work on. Yeah, but they are from the group of Vibrio.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, I have a question here for Florian. Can you export the live polychaetes internationally, like Japan, Taiwan, or Singapore?
Yeah. So for the last 2 years, we focused mostly on the Vietnamese market and soon to be in India. And because shipping live polychaetes is like, it's not easy. And first, because, you know, this is a live animals, and I think we are all dealing with live animals, so we know the difficulty. But also usually there is a very heavy registration process in the country. So we know that in some countries we can't export the polychaetes because the registration is too heavy, and the polychaetes will just stay too long during at the customs, for example. So it's always like it's always a custom-made decision, like if we go for that country or not. And to reply specifically to the question, at the moment we've never had any request for Japan or Singapore. But like, yeah, we are open for any countries in Asia. But then it's more about the registration process and also flights. You need to get a very fast flight right from Europe to the final destination. So the answer is yes, it depends on the country.
May I suggest at this point that each of the speakers type in your email address into the chat section so that any of the listeners can reach out to you and contact you about any of these issues that they want to explore further, particularly about buying your products. Okay, Robin, when you were going through your presentation, that was excellent coverage of the human issue of biosecurity. I'm wondering if you could say a few words about your water treatment philosophy and technology that you're using to keep biosecurity to the utmost.
So we use a very deep well. It's 600 meters deep, 1,850 feet deep, and the water that we pump up, it's basically completely devoid of any life whatsoever. We take this water and we use it directly in our culturing and into our hatchery systems. In the hatchery system, we will again treat it with UV. We do also treat it with a carbon filter. But other than that, we use no, we don't have to use any, ozone or chlorine or anything like that to disinfect it because it's completely sterile water when it comes up from there. So that's what we use for all our growth and all our production, all our hatchery water. So pretty lucky. It's an expensive well, but it's working really well for us, and the animals are thriving in it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very good. Okay. There's a couple more in a row for Steve. So let me pool a few of these together and ask Mr. Arce what he thinks. One is Zoea 1 syndrome a new disease? And secondly, how do you maintain krill SPF? I'm not sure what that means. And Steve, do you use breeder selection stress tests to develop your breeders?
Okay, I'll answer that last question directly. Yes, we do employ stress tests on Kauai to test our breeding stock before each shipment, as well as throughout the hatchery process. The other questions, I'm going to defer that to my colleague, Mrs. Miao Natamo. So if she can unmute and answer that question.
Okay, for the questions about Zoea syndrome, right? The early stage.
Zoea 1 syndrome,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, that is not the new disease, but
Right.
We have the serious case in this when we stock. We have two for the Venomized Zoea syndrome, Zoea 2 to Zoea 3, and also the early stage from Nauplii to Zoea 1. The late Zoea 1, we found a big number of the mortality. That means we have two programs. First is on Nauplii quality, and second is the water quality from the stock water. But the more serious is the fungus, because this is come from the Nauplii, and in fact from the maturation transfer to Larviculture, and not only the vegetative cell, but they have the spore. And then when they spread in the tank, they will we cannot kill the spore in the tank, so we have to wait until the vegetative cell, and then we kill by chlorine or whatever. But when in the Larviculture tank, we cannot kill by chlorine, and then we will lose all the Zoea 1. Yeah. So how to prevent this? You have to back to the water in maturation, the spawning tank or the holding tank, and make sure that you kill all the spore. because like the spore, we cannot kill by UV or chlorine. So we have to wait. So make sure that the infection, you have enough time when the spore germinate.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Meow. Thank you for that. Okay, let's see, moving on. Loc Tran, in your own hatchery, after 3 months of maturation, are the broodstock exposed to contamination, and how do you attend to that?
Okay, so sorry, could be some misconception when my presentation, because I also have a diagnostic lab in the region. So we do the service testing for anybody, and the data is collected from thousands of tests. But in our hatchery, I have to admit that we have to spend a lot of effort in testing the feed prior to feeding, and also freezing the feed. I think that is crucial to keep the animal clean. But I can tell you that there's a lot of costs related to testing. And if the batch is not okay, we have to discard. And so far we can keep our animal clean, but you know, it's a lot of burden to do, and a lot of cost related.
Yes.
So that is why I hope that somebody can do something, importing clean feed, and you know, make sure that the feed is still okay to keep the broodstock mature and producing enough Nauplii.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Loc Tran. Okay, this one's for Steve again, or Meow. How about algae paste use in the hatchery? Do you folks use that, recommend that, don't like it? What's the story? Algae paste.
Algae paste, we can use that, but it's difficult to maintain the water quality because it's always it's sink to the bottom faster than the algae, the live algae. And also the live algae, we can use that for control the environment in the tank, like control the pH and alkalinity. So
I agree with Meow. The live algae is preferred. I think the algae paste should be used in emergency situations if you need nutritional help right away or no algae at all. But I think the preference would be for live, healthy algal strains to maximize your health of your PLs.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question I will direct to Robin. And this man is asking, is there any SPR broodstock for EHP and WSSV?
So I don't believe there's SPR, there's SPT.
Okay.
You know, there's a variety of different broodstocks on the market today that are basically being marketed as being you know, tolerant of different diseases. I don't think there's a pure SPT broodstock being offered right now by anybody. Maybe Steve can comment on that, but there just isn't. What we do is we basically ship animals and we test them in various different environments under real production, and then we figure out which one, which family or which line is best suited for that particular condition, and that's what we continue breeding for. But it's a variety of different diseases, not just EHP, but whatever the farmer experiences out there. Even diseases that we don't even know about, or things that are, you know, coming up that we're going to be talking 2-3 years from now. By actually doing the selection inside the actual pond, we're able to go pre-select for those animals. But unless somebody can correct me, there's no SPT, there's SPT, there's no SPR.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple questions here that are asking about disinfecting polychaetes. Now I know Florian says don't bother, buy the clean ones, but we have a couple questions here. So either Loc Tran or Steve, you want to chime in with that? Do you have a preferred method for using, say, non-SPF polychaetes? Do you clean them, and what do you do? Loc Tran?
Yeah.
Okay. Shall I go first? So if
Yeah.
local polychaetes is the only choice, you have to follow a couple steps. So first, you already check for that region and check that supplier. You need to run some PCR, be sure that at least in that fishing ground, usually the local fishermen may collect the polychaetes in some certain region and they are clean. Because sometimes in some season is heavily affected with EHP and you need to source for another source. Second, once the polychaetes arrive to your facility, you have to go with the water flow through for at least 8 hours to 12 hours for the polychaetes to release all the fecal matter, whatever, to make sure that they are as clean as possible. And during that time, you need to submit the sample to a local trusted diagnostic lab and running for EMS and EHP using PCR. And if they are clean, you can feed to your broodstock. So with those steps, even though it's very costly and quite laborious, but I think it is still okay if that is the only choice. Okay. And if you want to be a little bit safer, you can freeze that polychaetes. But if you freeze the polychaetes, the spawning performance will reduce by 40 to 50%. So that's your choice.
Yeah, it's a big problem. I've always seen it as sort of the Achilles heel of an SPF operation is the maturation diet, and it's beautiful to see Florian's company coming along to solve that problem. It's really great. But the live supply is what you need, so that's what you need to work on. Okay, I have some more technical questions, and I should point out to everybody that's watching, the speakers are starting to type in their email addresses into the chat section. So if you look at the chat section at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the emails of all these distinguished speakers. Okay, there was one that I thought was kind of interesting for Steve. And he was, I can't see it here right now, but anyway, Steve, he was asking about black cover over the LR tank as a way of suppressing Vibrio and so forth. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, again, I'm going to hand that over to Meow because that's
Okay.
a commercial hatchery thing that she actually taught me. So
great.
Okay, for the back plastic cover, we cover that for control the temperature. So if you start the temperature 30, so we maintain 30 until myces. So the critical set for the Venomai is SUIA 2 and 3. So that temperature will help a lot for the SUIA to pass to SUIA 3. And also when we cover the plastic, we feed the algae, and then the algae will, we can calculate the cell density of algae in the tank. And if we open it, we have the lights, and then the algae will divide the cell. So have some overfeed. So that's why we keep it dark, and first for control the temperature, and second to control the algae cell.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Meow. Okay, here's another one to Loc Tran. Can EMS attacking in the hatchery always be proven by the presence of mass mortality at 2 weeks after stocking? Does this conclude that the EMS incident in the farm is not from infected PL because the stock PL had survived until PL harvest stage 10? and above. No mass mortality at 2 weeks after stocking hatchery tanks. You understand? I'm not sure.
Okay, let me check the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, the contamination of EMS in the hatchery is very obvious. So let's say if you can assure that the tank is clean, let's say plastic line, the water is properly treated, and you stock with the PL, and just after a very short period of time, the mortality happened, you can raise a very big question mark whether the stock is okay or not. One of the indicator is that if you keep one PL bag separate, and you can see the mortality happen in the plastic bag. Yeah, that I think is a very strong indicator that the PL has something wrong. And then you can send that that PL bag to a diagnostic lab for them to confirm. Okay, so testing is the key.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly right.
Yeah, and during the culture, I would say that the bacteria is very ubiquitous, and nobody can guarantee that, okay, my farm is 100% clean. No, even with my farm in Vietnam, I have to admit that we can go ahead and check, and there's still some pathogen out there. And that will be the matter of our management. Let's say better feeding program, better probiotic program, keeping everything stable, keeping the shrimp less stress. And those are the key things to keep the animal survive until harvest.
Excellent. Yes, very good, Loc Tran. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Can we detect EHP in the Nauplii or early post-larvae before they leave the hatchery? Is PCR accurate at that stage? Loc?
Theoretically, yes. And in our laboratory, we also optimize some of our diagnostic protocol to increase the sensitivity of the test. You know, we have to be sure that the extraction methods is correct, and also our PCR protocol is sensitive enough. We can also do nested PCR 2 steps, real-time PCR to increase the sensitivity of the test. And theoretically, we can detect EHP at those stages.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. Somebody in here wanted to know, Loc Tran, they were really curious about your fermented soybean meal. And could you give a few more comments on it, not to dwell on it, but just some comments of more of that experience? That's very interesting.
Yeah, you know, this those are the work that our lab has been doing for a couple of years, because, you know, the incident was that when we test for some fermented ingredients, we found something really interesting, and we want to understand more what happened. And I think during the fermentation process, it will produce some secondary metabolites from the bacteria, for example, lactic acid and so on, that has some bactericidal effects. And we want to go further, that let's say if we have a fresh fermented ingredients, for example, let's say soybean or rice bran, we can still deliver some prophylaxis or secondary metabolites from the probiotic, but at the same time, we will deliver the edible probiotic to the animal, and that may help it may help kill the bacteria in the shrimp gut and help occupy the shrimp gut with the probiotic. And that was what we could prove in the laboratory. And then we apply that in practice, including our hatchery and shrimp farm. So if we follow those procedures patiently, we can really improve the productivity in the hatchery, nursery, and the shrimp farm. And I hope that that practice may help us to become less dependent on antibiotic.
Yes. I'm a big believer in probiotics. I eat kimchi every day, and I think it's great for our shrimp too. So that's very exciting work. Okay. Luminescent bacteria. Oh, here's an interesting question. Robin Pearl, how different is the shrimp meat quality between a shrimp that's growing 0.2 grams a day and a shrimp that's growing 0.4 grams a day? And is there any difference?
So my answer to that is that I generally find that the larger the shrimp are, the older they are, the worse they taste. You know, I find that, you know, 25, 30 gram shrimp is usually much better tasting than a 45 or 50 gram shrimp. And, you know, but that's a personal thing. That's something, I don't know if it's maybe because they come out of maturation or they come out of, you know, they get different diets, but to me, there's nothing better than a 25 or 30 gram shrimp. And to me, that's the most perfect and delicious size. Whether there's a difference between because it grew at 0.3 per day instead of 0.2 per day, I don't think so. Well, it's possible, but I don't think so. But I do think there's an age difference, and when they get older, they just don't taste as good. That's my opinion. So
yeah. It'll be amazing when in the shrimp industry, the breeding companies get to the point where they start to work on the quality, the meat quality or whatever. You know, I mean, that's still long off in the distance, but that's actually an issue in cattle, obviously, and poultry breeding. So shrimp, we may get there someday. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, here's a question again for Loc Tran. What kind of essential oils and organic acids have you used to control EMS, and how do you use them, and is it effective?
Okay, and I presented some brief data from the laboratory, and when a company submits sample, they code everything, so I don't know. I just know that it could be essential oil, and you may refer to some company that have commercial product, and they can show with you the data from the laboratory. But frankly speaking, I don't know which one is which. Yeah.
So top secret. Okay. Very good. I understand. Okay. Now here we have one. I'm not sure who he's speaking to, but the question is, did you test the effect of pathogenic bacteria challenge on shrimp reared in biofloc water? I guess that would be Loc Tran and the stuff that you were talking about. Were you using biofloc water to produce the shrimp, or there was clear water, or can you say something about that?
For our, let's say, post-larvae production, we use clear water plus probiotic. When we do the challenge test, depending on the trial design, normally we use clear water. But we understand that if we have a biofloc system, it may give the shrimp some robustness in a EMS challenge, because it provides the abundance of other non-EMS bacteria to the shrimp gut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, I get it. You know, there's a few more detailed questions that if Lucia is happy with it, I'll just keep going. One question here from an anonymous person: has anyone used dried SPF polychaete from UK? I think maybe they mean frozen from Netherlands, but okay, dried from UK. Do you know of that product?
I think we have, yes. I think we tried it a couple of years ago. and it was like a case. Came in a powder form. Not sure it was UK, or it was somewhere from Europe, so it could have been UK. The performance was similar. I don't think we saw anything major that we said, oh my God, we got to use this, or we don't want to use it. They actually did some, we had some interns working at our farm to help prove it. It was inconclusive, but it wasn't horrible, but we're not using it anymore, so.
Okay. And Florian, do you want to comment on that, since that's your expertise, polychaetes?
Yeah, so like I've never used the air dried polychaetes, but so yeah, I can't really say about the result of it. We just know that what I know is like for sure frozen polychaetes don't give the same result than live polychaetes, so that's why we really want to focus on live. But yeah, like maybe that would be like a good thing to try for sure.
Yes. Okay. Great. Okay. Let's see, how do you healthy danger zone in larval rearings? Okay, here's somebody, Loc Tran. How do you identify the healthy danger zone in larval rearing tank?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. And in fact, we don't have a standard for this, but so far as we collect the data, we could feel that if the difference of between the probiotic density versus the Vibrio is 2 log or 100 times, usually in that tank, everything will happen normally and shrimp will be healthy. And, you know, for instance, we have 10 to the power 4 to 10 to the power 5 of probiotic CFU per ml of water, and 10 to the power 2 to close to 10 to the power 3 of Vibrio per ml. Usually everything is fine. But, you know, sometimes the density of Vibrio is still low, but we also have low density of other types of bacteria probiotic. And that is when luminous bacteria disease happen. Sometimes we find, let's say, only 10 to the power 3 of Vibrio, but there's a lot of luminescent disease in the tank. And usually when we check for the viability of our probiotic, they disappear. I don't know whether those pathogenic bacteria can express something or release something inhibiting the growth of probiotic or not.
We need to get the EMS and then the luminescent bacteria to mate up so that when the tank is luminescent, oh, okay, we have EMS, we know, okay? So there's a signal. It's not fun, but it would help, right? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this guy is a hard question. Okay. Here's one question from Henke. He wants to know, how can we determine a disease is caused by biotic or abiotic factor? Is there any significant symptom? Loc Tran, you're the man. You're the man.
You know, I wish that Dr. Don Liner still not retired.
Yeah.
He can answer this question perfectly.
I know.
But so far, per our junior experience, I would say that for a biotic agent, it has the transmissible pattern. So you may see a growing mortality or growing affected animal every day. You know, for example, let's say, let's take EMS for example. If you check an early onset of EMS affected pond, you may find, let's say, just a few % of the animal expressing atrophy, hepatopancreas, empty gut, etc. And then the following day, you see 30% showing that symptom. And the following day, you see, let's say, 5% of mortality. And then the following day, you see 40% mortality. In contrast, for abiotic disease, I assume could be a toxin or something. You don't see that pattern.
Right.
And usually you see a lot of mortality. And then if you do something to correct the water parameters, they may recover.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Don wouldn't have done it any better than that. Very good. You inherited his cap. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, this guy, Steve or Meow, could you talk about the best water level and stocking density in the maturation tank?
The maturation tank, the density about 5 to 8 pieces per square meter, but recommend about 5 to 6, both male and female, and the depth of water about 40 to 50 centimeters.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, here's a very good question. Any difference between post-larvae produced from ablated versus non-ablated females in terms of healthiness? That's the softball of the day. Robin, do you want to address that?
Yes, I do believe that there's a market difference in females that are not ablated. The offspring is better, the females are better. It's more of a natural process, and it leads to better results. And I think there's a lot of research and development being done on that. There's some papers that recently have been published that validate that. But maybe to go back to my original presentation, do what makes sense. Just you would seem that would help nature and help it along. So if it's possible, then why go the other way? So we fully support the non-ablation of animals.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jim. Also, just to comment, the non-ablation, following the research of Dr. Zacharias, and the non-ablation and the fact that they showed higher immunity levels and tolerance, I think is beneficial, and I think it's going to be better for the industry to promote that practice.
It would seem to me that in a very short order, a generation or two among the breeding companies, that if they were, breeding for that, we would have no need to ablate at all very quickly.
I think it's already kind of happening with the recent genetic improvement for reproduction and fecundity. I think that's part of the reason we're seeing that now.
Very good.
Yeah,
that's a great development. I love that. Okay, I have one here for both Steve and Robin. Do Kona Bay and/or API not produce broodstock that can eat frozen polychaete, and their performance is as good as if they did eat live polychaetes?
I can say Kona Bay is not selecting for broodstock to perform on frozen bloodworm diets, but we only use frozen bloodworms currently at our farm because we're a breeding company and biosecurity is the utmost. So we don't have the high production numbers that commercial hatcheries do, but we're not actively selecting for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, same answer here. We don't select. We're actually not even selecting for fecundity. We're strictly focusing on survival of the larva in the growth environment, because that's really what matters, what counts. So yeah, we're producing a lot more PLs and a lot more crosses than we can ever use. And so the actual fecundity of the animals to us personally is not necessary. And yeah, we certainly don't choose for that. I do know that our animals, that whenever we ship animals to our customer hatcheries, they do 2 or 3 times as good as what we can do ourselves, and that's because they're using live polychaetes, and it's incredible. It's really an incredible difference, but we just can't take that chance. I
can remember a conversation with one of my employees, and he was saying, oh, you're selling broodstock for so much money, blah, blah, blah. I need a big pay raise. So I handed him the bloodworm bill and said, yeah, tell me about how much money we're making. Look at this. And it was, you know, bloodworms, we were spending a lot of money. Needless to say, you know, it was a big deal. But now you have Florian's company. So that's really fantastic. Let's see. So I'm looking down here. I think we went through. Oh, here. Okay, here's one. Henke again has to Dr. Tran. There's a large variety of luminescent bacteria in the environment. Is there any change that those non-pathogenic luminescence present in shrimp fry? Is there any change that those non-pathogenic? I don't know.
Okay, so let's say if you check for the water and you see some luminous colony, it doesn't mean that you have luminescent disease. Because what you see in the larval tank is that you see some glowing dead shrimp. So that means those bacteria could kill shrimp and then express the luminescent. Yeah, so I think there's a very big group of bacteria in the environment that has the capability to be luminous, but not all of them are pathogenic. Yeah, I think just very low percentage of bacteria has the pathogenicity.
Does luminescence pass around? Is that a phage or something that moves between species, or can bacteria swap that?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me see now. That's really about doing business. Here's a question. I don't agree with it, but I'll read his question. He says, Vibrios and Gregarines are mostly causative agent for EHP. How do you control that? So maybe Loc Tran.
I think probably it's a typo, or he may, or the attendee may misunderstand the term EHP. He may refer to white fishes. I think he may refer to white fishes.
Right.
Yeah, so for sure that Vibrios is the direct causation of white fishes. And like I said, EHP is a very important primary factor, because if the shrimp are pre-exposed to EHP, the hepatopancreas become compromised and more susceptible to secondary bacterial infection that will eventually result in white fishes. And I'm not sure about Gregarine. Yeah, because I haven't worked with Gregarine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, these last couple of questions we already addressed. Disinfecting the worms. Then this next one from Mr. Neal is about kind of just doing business. He's okay. I'll read it. This is for Loc Tran. When a farmer claims there's a disease problem, particularly white spot, that originated with the fry in the absence of laboratory analysis for the fry prior to stocking, at what point in time after stocking can we consider that the claim may be legitimate? For example, there is a white spot outbreak in the farm 3 weeks after stocking.
Okay, so first,
on the spot.
Yeah. I think if the hatchery are using SPF broodstock, it's quite unlikely that the hatchery has white spot. If they're using pond rear broodstock, it's very likely. And the other thing is that in the larviculture, let's say if they maintain high temperature of 32+ degrees centigrade, for a pretty long period of time, let's say during the zoomyces and early post-larvae, it's unlikely that white spot can be an issue in the hatchery. So if we claim that the PL has white spot without checking the hatchery nor the PL, I think that claim is less likely to be valid. And white spot can happen in the farm very early. And during the outbreak of white spot, it can spread from one pond to the other, one farm to the other very, very quickly. And it can happen in early day of stocking.
Very good. Test, 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 right?
Sure, sure. For example, like now in Vietnam, because due to low water flow rate of the river, so that is why the outbreak of white spot could be found everywhere. So if we check for, let's say, carriers in the river or the canal, we can find white spot. So we have to be very careful during this period of time.
Wow. Okay, excellent. We have one last question in the Q&A, and I think we covered this already, but any experience using organic acids to prevent bacterial disease? And do you have some specific recommendation about these products? You talked about that earlier, Loc Tran. Do you want to mention any particular products that you're trying, or?
Yeah, you know, as panelists, we have to be as neutral as possible. So I will not mention any commercial name. Okay. But I can tell you that organic acid, if it is well formulated with short chain, medium chain, and with good ratio, it has pretty good antibactericidal. But be careful that also the organic acid has the acidity, that if you over-formulate in the feed, it may cause some harm to the animal. So that is why we need to do proper research. And another option is that you can use monoglyceride, which is a little bit more neutral. So it is less harmful to the animal.
I see. Very good. Excellent. Okay, so I think we finished all the questions, and there's the lovely Lucia. She's ready to kick us out. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to all the panel for sharing your time today and your expertise. They were really interesting presentations and a great discussion. And thanks to everyone for joining in. And if you want to stay up to date for the latest news on aquaculture hatcheries, I encourage you to subscribe to our publications on our website, hatcheryfm.com. And see you next month for the second webinar in the series on breeding and genetics. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well.